everybody. This is Laura. I am Laura Latimer, the founder of Nomadicare and a traveling occupational therapist of 6 years. So since I started traveling, I have learned a lot about this industry, and now it is my mission to help empower and educate travelers and recruiters in finding this middle ground win-win. So just so you guys understand transparently this industry better. So I'm a recruiter matchmaker where I interview and I vet recruiters that are just doing awesome things. I'll match them with travelers that are looking for a recruiter that are doing really good in the industry. And then of course I spend my time educating you guys to feel empowered. So that's what I'm up to today, or that's what I'm up to in this world. And then you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, hey guys, I'm Angelina, and I am a former travel nurse recruitment manager, and I worked as a travel nurse recruiter for about 6 years. I recently got out of the industry. I started a family, so I'm not doing that anymore. But when I was a recruiter, I often found, that there's a huge disconnect between recruiters and traveling healthcare professionals. And I thought, there's no reason for that disconnect. I wanted to share my insider knowledge with everyone and help guide you and empower you to make the right choices in your career. And most importantly, help to educate you so that you know exactly what you're getting into, the right questions to ask, and how to really go about this thing called travel nursing.
Yes. I love it. I didn't even realize we were both 6 years too. How funny.
Yeah.
I love
So weird.
it. So, today what we were doing is the very first episode of what I call the win-win war room. And the whole point of this is to see two different perspectives with the goal of talking about something that is controversial in the industry, listening to both sides, and then coming with this win-win solution. And so the war room is actually about nobody wins unless both sides win. So we want to hear the perspectives today, the insights, and where we can collaborate and do better as an industry on the topic of working with multiple recruiters and companies, and then how do you navigate that communication and negotiating between them. So we're going to start out with just this broad overview thought of what is the perspective, what are the fears that we have as travelers and then as recruiters on working with multiple travelers that are working with multiple companies, or us working with multiple companies. And so if you want to start with the recruiter perspective, and what is it that you guys are fearful of, or the thoughts that go through your head when you think of a traveler working with multiple companies?
Yeah, so as a recruiter, we are always in this huge competition. Everything is really urgent. We have to do stuff right away. And I guess our biggest fear is that we don't want to spend a lot of our time on someone who's just going to totally drop off the face of the earth after we spent, 8 hours or 4 hours looking for contracts, putting together pay packages, doing all of these things, and then they just don't get back to us. And then, that also goes into the fact that we want you to obviously start your contract. So a huge fear of ours is that you're going to verbally accept a contract and we have you all lined up, and then last minute you decide to go with another agency or just not take the contract.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And then I think on our side, on the traveler side, a lot of the fears that I hear, and I know fears that I had, is just not quite understanding what is allowed or not allowed, what is right, what is wrong. Like how do you talk to a recruiter and tell them you're working with multiple recruiters? That's scary for travelers. Or like, what about when you take a job and you really, really do like your recruiter, like you have this rapport, like they're your friend, and you get so anxious around this like breakup call. Like, how do I tell them I actually went with another company? And because it's kind of this taboo topic of working with multiple recruiters, we never know, should we be secret about it so that the recruiters still treat us great? Like, we want the recruiters to like work hard for us, really find the best jobs, and we also want the open communication to not burn bridges. And so I think a lot of us stay in this limbo area of like, I don't quite know what to say, so I say nothing, or I don't quite know what's right and wrong in this topic, so I do nothing. But at the end of the day, I think everybody wants good relationships and good honesty and trust, and we want opportunity. A lot of travelers do understand that working with multiple companies, it does give you opportunity to have more jobs, because different companies have different exclusive contracts. It's not like every company literally has the same pot of jobs, so we have more opportunity for jobs. and then it also gives us opportunity to make more money, to get paid better. So it makes sense why we want it, and then there's so much fear around how to communicate it and how to not feel bad about it. So, so with that in mind, I think we'll dive into, maybe we can start by talking about when you're starting this conversation, like we're just meeting for the first time. Maybe we can just talk about, in your perspective, what makes sense for maybe how that conversation could get brought up. Do you guys actually treat us differently if we're working with more than one and you find out about that? And then maybe just expectations you would have along the lines like getting started with that.
Yeah, I think when you are first reaching out to a recruiter and you're kind of feeling them out, it's really important to have an open and honest conversation with them right off the bat, that you are in the process of looking for, either a new recruiter or multiple recruiters, and also having, exactly what you're looking for in a contract. So a contract is not only about the pay. There's lots of other things that each individual person needs. So do you need day one benefits, or do you want guaranteed hours? Also, it's important to know if their agency will even negotiate with you, if they even have the freedom to negotiate, to change their contracts around for each individual nurse. So I think, yeah, right off the bat, just letting the recruiter know what you're looking for, and just getting to know them, because you might get a salesy vibe from them that might not match well with your personality. You might need someone to kind of educate you more and hold your hand a little bit along the way. So it's also about just having a good personality fit, kind of more of a friendship with the recruiter, I would think, too.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, hands down. Like, I think the perspective is very similar there. Yes, like that match of personality is so crucial. And so I agree, like that first phone call needs to be more about like, could this be a good fit? Like almost like a coffee date versus like, this is the time to like get serious job search, give me your credentials. Like you don't even know if this is who you want to be your rock and the person on your team during this traveling journey. So I completely agree, like the first phone call should be really open about what it is you're looking for. And so as a traveler, I would say it should be up to us. It should be up to both parties. Like I'm a huge advocate for everyone taking 100% responsibility for what's going on. But I can speak for the traveler side. I advocate for travelers to start that conversation really open about where they're at. To be like, hey, right now I'm just like, seeing what companies fit, and then seeing what recruiters like I really bond with and fit. So you can tell them like, this phone call is just for me to get to know your company and to see if the benefits align, and then see if you and I could like get along to be a good match. So right away the recruiter's thinking like, okay, like this is a time for us to bond. Like you put that expectation out there. And then for you as a traveler to go into it knowing what it is you want and need. Because the recruiter can't read your mind, and we all actually need pretty different things. So to go into that call prepared, knowing like, what do I actually need for my medical benefits? Do I need them to to start day one? Do I have my own insurance that I'd like them to pay me some money back because I'm not using theirs? Like, what is the perfect fit for you in a company? Is it a company that has guaranteed hours? Is it a company that places a lot in Hawaii? Is it a company that has these critical need, high paid jobs? What is it that you're really looking for? And ask those questions. And then also leave some space in that call for the bonding, right? Like the friendship. Like ask the recruiter, well, how did you get into recruitment? Like, what do you like about it? What tips do you have for me getting started? And see like how open they are, like how friendly they are, how good their quality of tips are. Like it's a time just to get that back and forth, I think.
Yeah.
But with that in mind, I also agree. So on this topic, I'd also agree that first phone call is such a great time to say, and I am someone that's planning on working with maybe 2 recruiters, because I understand in this industry it'll give me more job opportunities and I can look at different pay packages. I want to make sure you're completely fine with that, and I also want to assure you I do value your time, so I'm not going to just like use your time and just like give everything to the other recruiter, but I want to be open about that communication, because of course I would want you as my recruiter to be so open with me in communication. Does that feel like a good fit? And so just putting that out there from the beginning. And if you get back in any way like this guilt or this defensiveness or like this sales pitch, like, okay, like they're probably not a good fit for me, because that's gonna come back around later. So it's a good time to test out the water by you as a traveler bringing up that subject. How does that feel to you?
That I am 100% in agreement with that. I think that if a recruiter ever starts guilt tripping you, or saying like, "Oh, I'll beat any offer that you send me," kind of over promising,
Mm,
then I would say run. Like, they can't beat any offer, and they don't even know what the offers are. It's just they're trying to get you to commit to them right away.
yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, really good point. Yeah, that's awesome. So then I guess in that mindset then, so working with more than one recruiter, what do you feel like from there? Like, we had the first conversation, we've opened it up, you found someone that was like completely okay with that. Can I ask you in general, so you can say in general as recruiters, do you feel like recruiters treat travelers different who are working with more than one versus the one that say, I'm only going to work with you?
Honestly, I think it's recruiter by recruiter. Every recruiter is not the same.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say, like, general consensus is, if the traveling healthcare professional is open and honest, and that they're not being disrespectful. So if they're not like sending a generic email to all 20 of their recruiters saying, "I'll go with whoever will give me the most pay," or something like that. If they're actually taking the time to build a relationship, and work with 2 or 3 recruiters, keeping the numbers small, that it's almost expected as a recruiter that you are working with other recruiters. But I do think that it's really important to, just as a human to a human, treating each other with respect. We all have feelings, and ultimately, it's about having a positive relationship with each other, so that the recruiter will work hard for you, and then you in turn will do what is expected of you too. So
Yeah.
some might not put as much work into it, but it's really unfortunate that they would do that, because they could miss out on working with nurses. Because if a nurse or a healthcare professional doesn't work with you for this contract, down the road, if you keep in contact with them and have a good relationship with them, they could come back around in a few
Yeah.
months and work with you.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I can see both sides of it. I think it would be individual, because I've had some recruiters say, if I know they're working with more than one, I don't want to waste my time. So I'll kind of look for them, but I won't actively like look as hard. And then I've had recruiters say, "Oh, if I know if someone is working with another person, I like hustle even harder. Like, their competition bug goes in and is like, I'm not losing this person. Like, I am the best. Like, I'll find a job before anybody else." And they get that like awesome puffiness that makes them work harder. And I kind of like that, because I'm like, yeah, like, go go find the best job. Thanks. So I think you're absolutely right. Like, you kind of have to read your recruiter, and actually by working with more than one, you get a gauge for like who is actually hustling, who is calling you, because when you're only working with one, you have nothing to compare it to. And
Yeah.
I know when I started in the industry, I had an awesome recruiter. Like, he was so good, but I didn't know. Like, I didn't know how good he was. I thought that was standard in the industry, because he was my first one ever, above and beyond. Like, I honestly just absolutely loved him. And then he left the industry, and it was the first time I had to start talking to other recruiters, and I was like, oh my God, like, they're not all like him. Like, oh. And then it was a hard time to find someone that got close. But on the flip side, if I was only working with one that was not doing awesome, I still would not have known. And so I still would have thought, oh, that's just what it's like for recruiters. And so having more than one also lets you like set different standards and see how different recruiters work, which is really interesting.
Yeah, yeah. For me, when I was a recruiter, if you were committed, if we had a good relationship, first of all, like if I maybe met you in person or had a really good conversation with you on the phone, and then if you sent me your resume, you'd go to like the top of my list. Like, I am doing everything I can to get you to choose me. So, showing commitment, but also having a really good connection was important.
Yeah, and I will admit, like, it was both ways, right? Like we had this first conversation with this first recruiter that was really, really like great. Like, he walked through a lot with me. I was a new traveler, so he did his due diligence to educate me, to laugh with me, to find out why I was traveling, to bond. But then after we got off the call, like, there was no way I wasn't sending him my paperwork. Like, it was just like, duh, that's the next step. So I was like, where do I send it? Is this resume look okay? Like, I wasn't trying to hold anything back. And at the time, I didn't know how much that probably went into play of him like keeping me on the top of the list, because I just gave him what he said and we bonded, and he paid great. I just did what I thought was normal, because there was no normal yet for me, right? but I think that probably played into it. And it's a really good point. If you do talk to someone in bond, there's no reason to hold back that paperwork, and you should give it to them to give them like that sign of like yeah, like you can trust me and I can trust you. Let's like start this relationship. Because the more I think we hold onto our paperwork like it's some kind of like fancy poker chip, the more we're losing the recruiters to really hustle for us, because you're slowly losing trust with them. Like, are they really interested in me? Are they just fishing for information? Like, I can't tell. Travelers have sent me their resumes, like are still like texting me back. Like, I'm looking for jobs for them every day. So it's in our best interest to send in this paperwork. So, but that being said, one of the concerns I know travelers have is around the paperwork and the references. We know if we send our paperwork to too many companies, that our references could get totally bombarded. So do you have any insight into how we can make that like a win-win, or what we can do about that piece of it?
Yeah. So honestly, a lot of agencies ask for a lot of paperwork up front that they really don't need. So if you have a basic profile, which is just like your resume, a skills checklist if you have one, your license, your ACLS, BLS, any credentials that you have, that's really kind of all they need. Okay, that's really all they need to submit you. So if you tell them to hold off on the references until you're ready to check them, when I was a recruiter I worked for 4 different agencies, and that was totally fine, all of those agencies. Another good idea is to have written references already prepared. So if you have like letters of recommendation, or if you even got some references at your last assignment, you could send those to the recruiter and tell them, they can verify them once, you're ready for that. But it's just really good for you to have those prepared already, because honestly, as a recruiter, references for traveling nurses, they were hard to get. Like, that would take a lot of my time to get those references. So anything that you can do to kind of help and push things along, that's always great.
Nice. Okay, that's great. That sounds awesome. And I think the one tip I would give the travelers listening to this is make sure that, or not make sure, but it's easier if you have all of that stuff in one spot. Because I know when I first started traveling, I'd put my paperwork in like folders and boxes, and it wasn't readily available. And after I did it for a few years, I ended up making a Dropbox folder on my computer that had a skill checklist in it. It had an updated resume. It had a list in there of just like all the addresses I was living at, because I was like forgetting, and all the names of the places I worked, the names of managers, coworkers I wanted to like keep up with for references. I just made a different page for each one of these, and one of the Dropboxes was just for me, because I didn't need to send all of that to new companies. But one was an easy reference Dropbox for new companies. So if I was, talking to a recruiter that I was bonding with, and I wanted to send them my resume, because they need to see where I've worked and where I could potentially get jobs based on my background and my skills checklist and my credentials, so they can see like, yeah, she's certified, this is where she has her license. That's fine. I have no problem giving that to a company I'm actually curious and working with. So I would just share the Dropbox link, and then the recruiter would have all of it right then, and that helped me not to be so like I have to go find them and then figure out a way to scan them again. I just did it once and had it. So that was helpful for me.
That's awesome. I would have loved you. I'm like, great.
Yeah, that is totally a win-win, because otherwise I'd have the best intentions, but I would be like, oh, I still haven't sent that. So it helped me so much, because I was like, oh, I know where that stuff is. Like, thank goodness. Yeah.
Yeah.
Organization as a traveler can be a learning experience at first.
Yeah. I think even having like just your basic stuff, your basic requirements, just in like one PDF in your Dropbox, you can just be like, boop, there you go, too. So they know exactly what it is.
Yeah. Totally
really helpful too. Yeah.
Oh, that's really good. Okay, so I'm super curious about, so one of the fears that come up for us is like, if we are getting paid a certain amount, there is a profit margin for the company. And then we know that most recruiters and most companies work on some kind of commission basis. Like, they get paid more if we get paid less, type of thing, which is why I think we get this anxiety around like, oh, am I getting paid the right amount? So I'd love to hear from you. You've worked with 4 different companies, like insight on how recruiters get paid, and then just any thoughts around that, like how that works and how we can work together to make that more transparent and easy between the two different people.
Yeah, so what I've found is that every agency kind of pays their recruiters a little differently. I'll say the most common way for recruiters to get paid is to have a base salary and then they're paid commissions based on the amount of revenue that they're bringing in. So base salaries are usually around like 30 to 40,000 a year, and then commissions that's usually like 5 to 15% of the gross profit that they're bringing in. And like I've worked on tier structures where I would get a certain amount of commission if I'm bringing in like 20,000 a week, and if I was bringing in like 60,000 a week, I'd get more commission. So it fluctuates. I've also worked for another agency where I was paid only a salary, and I think my salary was like 45,000, and then I was paid a bonus structure on top of that, and it was off of the yeah. Okay, so I also so we got cut off, but I also worked for another agency where I was paid a salary of like I think it was 45,000. No, it was 55,000, and then I was paid a bonus on top of that based on the quarterly profit of the entire branch, and then that was split up between all like 15 people who worked there. Even the people who weren't recruiters, we all shared the same profits. So I would get it was like $300 a month on top of that. Yeah. So it was, I preferred to work off of commission because I was in total control of my income. Like I could make as much money as I wanted to, even though the base salary was like 30,000, I could make, over 100,000 a year, if I really hustled for it. And then I also worked for another company where I was paid minimum wage, and then I was paid $1,000 per nurse per contract that I got. So
Interesting. But your favorite one was the one that was like a 35-ish base salary, but you can make like a good commission on each one.
Yeah, because my opportunity was endless. I could make pretty much as much money as I wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then if we talk about the concept of you do make more if we make less, like if you're based on like the profit margin, what can we do as travelers to kind of help us not fall into that trap of like saying I want to make this much, or having no clue what the bill rate is and what the gap is between what we're getting paid? Like we don't get that information, and so a lot of it comes down to the relationship and trust. But on top of that, is there any other tips that you could give a traveler on making sure like these new travelers aren't getting paid so much less than they're worth and they just don't know it for a while, which you hear of happening, unfortunately?
I know. Yeah, it's tough. I can tell you that agencies do aim for 20 to 25% profit margin of the bill rate. And that's usually about $15 an hour is what they'll make off of a bill rate. And, the recruiter doesn't get all of that money. It's broken down throughout the agency. So the recruiter gets a small percentage of that $15. But I think as a new traveling nurse, it's just so hard. There's calculations that you can do, and I'm happy to help anyone with this if you have any, questions about it. There's calculations that you can do to kind of guess what the bill rate is, or, guess how much they're making off of it. But yeah, I think as long as you're getting close to what you need to make to support yourself and to also make, a profit off of it yourself, I guess that's the kind of the best advice that I can give you. There's no real way to know exactly, if they're really taking advantage of you or not, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I think that is one of the reasons I advocate for travelers having two different recruiters, because it does help. Like you actually have something to compare it to. And so if one recruiter really is like lowballing and not paying fairly, you will see that, because the chances of you getting two recruiters doing that, fingers crossed, doesn't happen. But that's one way to help protect yourself. It's just about like seeing what are the trends, and if you're talking to two about two different jobs, you really can compare pay. And if one is really undershooting the other, it can be a red flag of like, like I wonder why they're paying me so much less consistently, and they might not be. They might be one of the recruiters. But that being said, like bill rates change like crazy. So just because you do get like a low offer, 1 week and a high offer the next, that's going to happen no matter what recruiter you have, because it's not all about the recruiter. They don't have as much control as we wish they did on what the bill rates are. They do have to work with like such huge bill rates. And I'd be curious, because I'm not, behind the computers, and you spent a lot of time there, like seeing the different bill rates. Is there like this huge fluctuation even between the same state, or like what kind of insight can you have on what bill rates actually look like?
Yeah, so bill rates I would say are between 50 to $120 an hour or
For
more.
just to specify, because I know I teach nurses and therapists, so are you talking specifically about RNs?
Oh, I'm talking about RNs, yeah. Um, so yeah, if you want to put like CNAs and everyone in there, yeah, probably 45 then. But yeah, so facilities can have different bill rates with different agencies. A local agency might have a good relationship with a hospital, and they might have been able to negotiate something different for a bill rate, even within the same city, the same hospitals. Bill rates change so rapidly because a lot of times certain hospitals, like the big well-known hospitals, will kind of drive the bill rate. So I staffed a lot in Seattle, and there's a really large hospital system there, and all of the hospitals would kind of follow what that hospital was doing. So they greatly increased their bill rates, and these other hospitals weren't getting any traveling nurses, so they were forced to increase their bill rates as well. And then just seasonally too. So during the holiday season, you might see in bill rates spike because they're needing people to work during that time because staff nurses take vacations, or whatever happens. And then also during the summertime, you'll see an increase in bill rates as well, as staff nurses take vacations, and then there's like the snowbirds going south and all of that.
I like my sunshine, so
Yeah.
get me out of the snow. Hence why I'm in Bali right now.
I know, I'm so
Is
jealous.
it really?
It's snowing in Seattle right
Oh,
now, so
that's cool.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Weird.
No
It's
kidding.
March. I'm like, where's this snow?
Yeah. I love that. And I think that if I was to offer any advice to travelers, which you can tell, like, give me any feedback on this, but I tell travelers to make sure that they're feeling empowered and taking control over what they see in the pay rate breakdown, so they really can compare between two, because companies have different ways of breaking down pay. But what I need as a traveler, if I'm talking to two different companies, I need to see similar ways that the pay is broken down. So I like them to show me like the taxable portion, each of the per diems broken down separately, travel A to travel A to travel B, how much am I getting like for the travel part, anything extra, like any bonuses, if they're paying for a CEU, like I just like it all written out. And so I have like a pay breakdown guide that I give to travelers, but I use really with my recruiters, and they know that's how they'll break down pay for me, so I can just see it so simply. Where is the money actually going, so I can actually compare and have and just feel more in control of like, what am I getting paid, where is it going. If I'm extending to another contract, I can see very clearly what money is left over. Like if the bill rate stays the same, the company's no longer paying me travel from point A to point B. They're no longer paying for this, my license reimbursement. They're no longer paying me for the background check and all of that. Where's that money going now? Just back to the profit of the company, or are they going to do, like give me money back as the person that's working? So that's why I like it to be broken down so clearly. And if I'm working with two companies and they're offering me the same job, I want to see like what are they offering me for this job and where's that money going. So that really helps me with pay. I think it's just really understanding where does pay go for us, because we get paid so different as a traveler than we ever did in permanent. So that helps. And I am happy whoever's watching this, we can put the link and you guys can get that pay breakdown that I use for free, because it's really helpful to have that visual. So I think that's one thing that can help you, not necessarily like help protect you from the recruiters that do undercut you a lot, if you have a really easy way to look at pay breakdown and you're comparing between two companies what they're paying. Any
Yeah.
feedback or thoughts on that?
So you'll see pay packages all, like Laura said, all kinds of different ways and different denominations too. So it gets very confusing. So just breaking everything down into an easy dollarly figures or dollar figures so that you can just compare it straight across the board. It's just the best way to go, because you'll see like stipends, you'll see like $800 a week, and then you'll see like an hourly for your hourly, and it's just way too confusing. So I think as much as you can do to make those different pay packages look as similar as possible, and making sure that you totally understand, GSA rates and, just taxable rates and all of that, it'll help you to make an educated decision.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think the last thing that we can touch on that I think has some controversy to it in this money realm is about the concept of us as travelers telling you guys as recruiters what our bottom line is, like saying this is the minimum that we'll make versus not. And I know there's two schools of thought here. And so I can say my school of thought, and then I'd love to hear your perspective on it, because I think it's important for people to understand why there's pros and cons to this. So the concept of negotiating with the bottom line, talking to a recruiter and saying, I want to make this much money and I won't take anything below it. So there's one side of it that says it's great because, and I know you'll touch more on this too on the recruiter perspective, there's so many jobs and you don't just need to be presented every job in the whole world. So you want to set up some kind of boundaries of what it is you're looking for, so the jobs getting presented to you are so in line with what you want and there's not time wasted on either side. But the concept of negotiating this way, of like having more control over your money, because we just heard how big the bill rates can change and be different. Can you imagine if I said my lowest amount that I'm willing to make, my minimum bottom line is X, and then a bill rate comes in that's like $110 an hour, and the recruiter already knows I will take way less than that as my minimum. And so they can pay me, a little bit more than my minimum and say, hey, this is great, it's more than your bottom line, it's in the place you want, and not tell me there's actually a lot more I could make. But they're gonna look so good to their company. They're making a way bigger profit margin for their company, for themselves. They get more commission that time. And so I could lose out on a lot of money the hospital is paying for me to be there and work because I have no clue. And so because of that, what I like to tell recruiters is I want to make the most money I can make on any given bill rate, because I know they fluctuate so much. So it's so hard for me to tell you the lowest, because I just want to make the most I can. And that's why I work with two companies. And usually the parameters I set are less about money and more about location, the setting and stuff like that. I still give parameters, but mine is usually like, this is like the kind of job I want, and I just want to make the most I can, is what I typically say. But I'd love feedback, like from the recruiter perspective on this topic.
Yeah, so for a recruiter, it's we put together pay packages, like most of recruiters put them together case by case. Some agencies do have cookie cutter pay packages where you're not allowed to negotiate at all. But usually what a recruiter will do is, when you tell them you're looking for a contract in such and such state with shift, your specialty, all of that, they'll go into like all of these databases, probably like 5 to 10 databases, emails, all of this. It takes a lot of time. And they'll put together all of these pay packages for you, these contracts for you, and send it off. But when I was a recruiter, I found it to be really helpful when people would tell me, would tell me their bottom line, because I knew that I wouldn't waste my time putting together pay packages for bill rates that I knew were just going to be way too low for the traveler. And then I also knew that they wouldn't even consider those. So if people would not tell me a bottom line, I would kind of just be putting together like hundreds of pay packages for them, like wasting a whole day on this for them to maybe not even.
I wish I had water. I'm gonna go get some water real quick. Yeah. I'll be right back. So, did you finish that thought when I started coughing?
No, I forgot. Yeah, I forgot where I was. So I think I could start maybe that whole part again. I don't even remember what I said.
So yeah.
I don't think I said the part about running it by the supervisors.
Oh yeah. You were talking about running it by the supervisors. Oh, the
Okay.
bill. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Because I said the whole thing about the. What were we even talking about? The bill. What are we talking
I
about
know.
right now?
I'm like, I don't even remember what I said. Like, it was
Oh
we
my
were
god.
talking about
It was a concept
telling the bottom line.
Oh, the bottom line. Yes, it's
Yeah.
good. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, so sorry everybody. I had a cough attack and had to get water. So now, yeah, let's hear about your perspective on the traveler telling you the bottom line versus not saying just pay me the most possible. Okay, so then you can start from the beginning because I don't remember where we left off. Yeah.
Okay. So it was really helpful for me when a traveler would tell me the bottom line, so the amount that they could not live less than. Because then I knew when I was looking for contracts, when I was sifting through these databases at like hundreds of contracts, I would know, don't even offer them this, don't even put together the calculations for a pay package for this one because it's not worth my time. They won't accept it anyways. So that was most helpful for me because I could target specific hospitals for them, the hospitals that I could create a pay package tailored towards their needs. But honestly, it did give me kind of the upper hand too because I would know that they would, if I had a really amazing bill rate, I would always have to usually run it by my supervisor if I was working for an agency where I did work off of commission. If I worked for an agency where I was giving away cookie cutter pay packages that were already set, I would just tell them, what it was, and they would accept it or not because I wasn't able to negotiate. But for the ones that I had to run by my supervisor, honestly, often they would want me to go in at a lower price, at a lower pay package, because they obviously wanted to make more profits as well. So I have had supervisors tell me, well, try to get them at this rate, and if they give you pushback, then you can give them more, and then you'll look like the hero. So people have told me that, and I have had to advocate and really push to get travelers higher amounts, directly with my supervisors. So
Yeah.
there's pros and cons.
And so that would probably be a case where if you knew the traveler was talking to another recruiter, you would want it to be higher. For one, because you're like, I don't want to lose them. Like, what if they give them the higher rate? Two, it sounds like the relationship's really important. Like, if that person's been the top of your list and you really bond with them and like them, you're probably going to go push back on the recruiter or the supervisor and really want to give them that fair package because you have invested interest in this human who's traveling. So that makes sense why the relationship's so important. Working with multiple recruiters can benefit you because it'll put in the recruiter's head, I could lose them if this other company has this job too and I go at such a low rate, right? And so I forgot the last point I was going to make, but yeah, it seems like that makes the most sense. Keep the relationship really open and good and a real relationship, mutually real. It's not just about us. Like you said, the recruiters are human and have these beautiful lives as well. It's good to have a back and forth. And the recruiters that stand out the most to me, I knew when they were having kids and getting married and what they were going through, and we could laugh about dates they went on. It was an actual back and forth relationship, not just them being my sounding board. But I loved it, and they've stayed my friends since they left the industry even. So I think having that relationship, I would imagine those people would have pushed for me more because they were my friend. They legit were my friend. And then, and then the other side, having more than one recruiter. Those seem to be two win-wins. Would you think so?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think just, treating each other respectfully, being open and honest. And then, same with you. I have travelers who I've worked with 6 years ago and I'm still friends with them now. So, now I give them free advice and little tips and stuff. So
yeah, totally.
So
you're a good friend to have.
Yeah, it would make me The ones that I was really close with and like I met with in person, or like I just had fun, good, lighthearted conversation with,
Yes.
I would think, well, Cherry has 5 kids. I need to get her a
Yeah.
higher pay and, stuff
Yes.
like that. So I would just
Yeah.
know them on a personal level.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that a lot. So I think all that makes sense, and it's unfortunate that that is part of our industry. But I think about it. Me as a traveling um, therapist, like when I would go into skilled nursing facilities, these facilities made money based on the minutes that we worked with clients, and like Medicaid and Medicare were based off of this. And so I remember in that industry, like supervisors would push us to get these minutes so their profits would be better, and they would push our like decision making on, can you get more minutes out of them? Can you be more creative to get more because we get paid more? And so I think it's every industry is this like fight between, what is right versus what makes most profits. And each recruiter has to be able to stand up for what they think is right and what they can sleep good at night, knowing they're doing for their travelers and their company. Everyone has their own thing, but I think it's nice just to think about all the sides of that, because people get pushback from every step of any kind of company too. And then I keep losing the final thought. I'm sure it's like so good.
I do have something to say about recruiters. I think it's really important to, let a nurse know if you can't accommodate them. Don't waste their time, because I know a lot of times I get emails and questions all the time from traveling nurses, and they're like, well, I told this recruiter that I wanted a contract at this hospital in this state, and they sent me these contracts that were totally not what I was looking for. So I think that is it's just wasting their time, and it's wasting your time too. So, just being honest with them. If you can't accommodate them, you just can't. And maybe you can down the road, but right now you can't do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely agree with that. Yeah. And I think that's a great segue to go into two things. One, I think we can both agree no one wants a double submittal on any side, anybody. That's like the lose, lose, lose. Like the hospital doesn't want it. So for those of you who are really new to travel, this concept of the double submittal is when you're working with more than one company. So more than one company has your profile. So they have your resume to submit, and two different companies submit you to the same job. And what people say is that if that happens, you have a higher potential of just losing that opportunity because the hospital might just not want to deal with it and throw you out. So that's and I've heard both. Like I've heard some people say that doesn't always happen. I know I've been accidentally double submitted and still got the job. So it's not as like devastating as people say, but regardless, nobody wants it. And there's different things. Recruiters do submit people without their approval sometimes. Not all recruiters, but it is for some reason this like common thing in the industry. And I know even when I went to the travelers conference where like 1,000 travelers come together, we asked a question in one of the when I was giving a speech, and I was like, who here has been double submitted? And it was like well over 80% of the room raised their hand and had been, or no, I didn't even say double submitted, I said submitted without approval. And so, and then every time I ask a recruiter, I'm like, who would do that? Nobody raises their hand. So someone is like lying. Like recruiters know it's wrong. But then I talked to a recruiter once who talked about, we get so much pressure on how many resumes we submit to jobs. Like that's one of our metrics. So a lot of times people will submit people to jobs that they think they won't take. They don't think the call will happen. So in their metrics, it looks like they're submitting to more jobs so they look better, which was interesting. And you can touch on that. I'd love to hear if you have any insight because you worked with 4 companies. But regardless, double submitting should not happen because the communication should stay open. Recruiters should never be submitting to a job without explicit approval. You lose your power to negotiate and go over pay after you're submitted. You want to talk about pay fully before you submit to a job and pick one company to submit you. That's the order it should go. And so don't feel this pressure to get your name into a job before you've talked about what are the pay, the guaranteed hours, what's the location, what's my shift, morning or night. Those things are things you should know before you're saying, yes, let me try to get this job. But I'd love feedback on like this concept of double submittal.
Yeah, so yeah, it is a part of our metrics is how many submissions did you have today or whatever this week or whatever. But I definitely don't agree with it. The only reason I would have done that when I was a recruiter is if I knew that the hospital hospital, was a really urgent contract and that they would have a lot of interest in it. And if the nurse told me, they gave me the okay, like, go ahead and submit me wherever, I just want a contract in Seattle or whatever the case would be. But this happens a lot, and I get emails from traveling nurses all the time about it. And I feel like if someone does do that to you, it's a cause for concern. And it's just I think it's totally disrespectful because you did not give them the okay to do that, and you could have been submitted by our agency, and now the hospital might be looking at you. They're this person can't be trusted, or this person is just, they might think whatever they're thinking, and I do know that the hospital, they want you as the traveling professional. A lot of times they could care less about what agency you work for, but just to cover yourself and to make sure that you're working with the agency that you want to work with, and that you're not, burning any bridges or having the hospital look at you some kind.
Yep. Yeah, totally. And then the last thing I'd love to hear your perspective on, I think it's so important for us to understand this, and I'm still learning to understand this because we're obviously not recruiters, is the concept of how much time each task takes you. And that will help us with our expectations, because it's not really fair for us to work with so many recruiters and expect so much out of all of them when we're sucking up so many hours of your day. But we are, traveling nurses, traveling therapists. We're not recruiters, so we don't understand in our head, how long does it actually take for you to put together a pay package? How long does it take for you to actually look at an area and see how many jobs are available for my specialty? And so it would be really cool to hear your perspective on what are the things that we can be asking in that first meeting that doesn't take up so much time but helps us see if it's a good fit, versus what are the tasks we can ask recruiters to do that take a long time. So we should be more cautious about asking for too much, because it's not really respectful.
Yeah, I think in that very first conversation, it's important to know exactly what you specifically need in a contract, so that the recruiter can know right away if their agency will even be able to accommodate you. So if you need day one benefits and their agency just doesn't offer that, then they know right away, okay, I can't, work with this nurse. So yeah, just being really knowledgeable of that. And then so it takes a long time for recruiters to sort through all of the contracts. So especially recruiters who recruit nationwide, they're looking for contracts in every single state, lots of different databases that they're connected to. They might even have random emails from managers or staffing people at the hospital. And so, of course, they need to have this all organized on their end, but it does take a lot of time to sort through all of that, go through. And then on a case-by-case basis, some agencies have cookie-cutter pre-made packages, but other agencies have their recruiters do it. And some have little calculators that they created for the recruiter, the recruiter net profit mark. Others don't have those calculators, and recruiters have to actually go in and do the calculations by hand, put together the entire pay package for every single contract for you. Yeah, so I have had to do that, and that takes a lot of time. So I think, like, if you have a specific area in mind, your shift preference, your specialty, all of that, just letting them know a range that you're looking for or your bottom line, and then everything else that you need in a contract. So they can more quickly. It's going to take a long time regardless. So yeah, just on your end, being organized and just knowing what the right information is that you need to tell them.
Yep, totally. I think that's great. So knowing what we want will save you time, and it's so respectful, because if we're so general, you can spend all that time making pay packages that we didn't actually want. So being super open and clear about what it is we're looking for sounds really important. And then at the very beginning, so the very first call, if I am, let's say I'm an ER RN, and I want to go to, I don't know, Omaha, Nebraska. And I just can't wait to get to the cold. Okay, so I want to talk to different companies. I'm just starting, and see how many ER jobs do they have that are day shift in this place. Is that reasonable to ask before you even have my resume or anything? So I'm knowing, does this company even have a lot of the specialty? Does that take not as long? But once you get to specific.
Yeah. So yeah, totally. If you just want to see like if they even have ER contracts in Nebraska, if that's even somewhere they staff, you could call them and ask them that. It doesn't take a long time. They know where they staff and they know where most of their contracts are. Yeah, so I worked for an agency where most of their contracts were in like Wisconsin. They had a few nationwide, but like most of them were in Wisconsin. So, I would be honest and tell them, yeah, I could maybe get you a contract somewhere else. But recruiters pretty much, they know where stuff is. They just don't know specifics, usually bill rates. They'll know like the specialty, the shift, the hospitals. If you know that you want to work for like a level 1 trauma center or a teaching hospital or a community hospital, stuff like that, that would be important to tell them too.
Okay, perfect. So you could ask that before the resume in that first introduction. How many jobs do you have in general and what I'm looking for to see if it's a good fit? And then next step might be send in that Dropbox folder, skills checklist, resume, your credentials. It shows a bit of seriousness on both sides, like that step of commitment, saying I'm not just wasting your time, I'm not just fishing for jobs for another company. So maybe do that, have another like friendly conversation about why you travel and stuff like that. And then at that point, it would be fine to ask you to break down bill rates and actual jobs. But maybe just be cautious about how many, like only doing it for jobs you're actually be serious about, not just to like play around, does that sound fair?
Yeah, so I think also on the recruiter's end, the recruiter they should tell you like, yeah, I have a lot of contracts at this large level 1 trauma center. They might tell you like information about the contracts before they go through the time of putting together pay packages for you. So yeah, so then like once they tell you some information, you could say, tell them like, yeah, you want some more information about it. But if like you won't work at like some place rural community hospital and that's not for you, then they know they shouldn't even look at those kind of contracts. Yeah.
Well, good. Well, is anything else popping up in your head that you would love for recruiters or travelers to know when thinking about working with multiple companies or in negotiating their pay?
Yeah, I think it's also important, like when you're shopping around for agencies. Oh my gosh, hang on, okay. I think it's important when you're shopping around for different agencies to look at the agency as a whole as well. So this, for recruiters too, like telling the traveling nurse all about your agency and what sets the agency and yourself apart from other agencies. So, I've worked for agencies where I was the only recruiter and I was like one of 2 people in the department. So I did everything, the credentialing, the housing, all of that. I've worked for other agencies where they had like specific departments for housing, specific departments for credentialing. And it made a huge difference for the traveler. So, anything that you can let them know beforehand that will make their lives easier and, just kind of give them more information. It's really important.
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, good. Well, I think that was like really, really interesting, and it sounds like even though it's such a controversial topic and people really tiptoe around it, it comes down to good communication, like empathy on both sides holding themselves responsible, and I'd say for the travelers just to rest assured that it is completely normal and okay to work with more than one recruiter, and that you can feel empowered to have those conversations. And if there's this guilt or this salesiness that comes up, like it is totally okay to say, like, walk away, because there are lots of recruiters out there that are going to be open about it. And especially if you're open, especially if you're one of those travelers that is respecting their time and having great conversations and getting in your resume, like they're going to want to work with you and be okay with you working with more than one company because they get it. Like that's what they would be doing if they were out there, because they get it. And so I think just don't be worried about those conversations, because it actually makes you look stronger. Like it makes you look like you kind of know the industry, that you're willing to bring that up in a friendly way, like not in a way that's entitled, like I'm going to work with these companies because I want to make the most pay, but just tell them I will respect your time, but I am working with multiple recruiters and I just want you to know from the get-go, like that you're okay with that. And they're going to be like, oh, like this person's going to communicate. So that's great. So I think communication, being a traveler that a recruiter wants to work for, will make them work harder regardless of how many other companies you're working for. And yeah, and just educating yourself, like both of us, like we really want everything to be fair. We want you to get paid what you're worth, and so yeah, just feeling empowered to have those conversations. And if you do end up in a situation where a company, you know, you take a job with a company and you have a great relationship with another recruiter, I totally get like why you would feel kind of bad. You like that recruiter a lot. You wanted them to get that commission. They worked hard for you. But I think the worst thing you can do there is to just disappear because it's uncomfortable. So I would say just make sure you have that conversation. Like, and all it can be is a conversation of gratitude, of how much, thank you so much for your time. Like, this job was like a perfect fit and I took it for this 13 weeks, but let's stay in touch. I'd love to give you a chance the next go around. Like, I really, really appreciate what you did. And then there's no bridges burnt, and there'll be no awkwardness in 13 weeks when you come back around like, sorry, I just disappeared on you. Like, because that then all of a sudden some trust is broken and the recruiter doesn't know if you'll do that again. So just really having those conversations, because both sides really appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. And just, you know, same goes for recruiters, like just having the traveler's best interest in mind and letting them know that you want the best for them, even if they don't choose you as a recruiter. And, you know, keeping that friendship alive. And, you know, like I said, they might come back around in a few months and work with you again. Everything in this industry is temporary. So just always keeping that in mind.
Yeah. Well, that sounds great. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited for this first episode and to collaborate in this way and to look at two different sides and come to, you know, cool empathy and understandings from what different sides go through. So we're so grateful for you guys to watch. I know both of us have something special for you. For me, I have my pay breakdown guide. I'm happy for you guys to use, and that's something you can just email the recruiter and say, can you break down the pay like this so I understand it better? So there'll be a link that has where you can get the pay breakdown guide. And then I'm also going to give you this guide that's kind of funny. It's like a how to break up with your recruiter. But really, it's about how to communicate well with your recruiter. So with their email templates. And some of the templates are for when you're just getting in relationship with the recruiter, to open up the conversation about you work with multiple recruiters and like expectations in a friendly way. And then there's templates at the end that talk about how do you break up with a recruiter that you really do want to break up with. You want them to stop calling you, or how do you break up with a recruiter but you want to stay in communication. So they're just email templates to get you. And also the recruiter matchmaking. So if you are a traveler, an RN, or a therapist, or a respiratory therapist, if you're a healthcare traveler, I do interview recruiters, and I'll vet the ones that have the knowledge, that have the honesty and the integrity to be great recruiters. And I'll match you with a recruiter that can help you along your journey, or at least get you started in the right direction. So you have someone that's vetted them, and then you can talk to them and see if the company is actually a good match for you. So there'll be a link that you can sign up for that if you're looking for a recruiter. I can do that for you as well.
Yeah, and I have a guide for you. It's called Travel Nursing Insider Secrets. So it's more geared towards new traveling nurses. I kind of go through the steps that you need to take to become a traveling nurse, and then I let you know of some warnings to look out for. I give you a guide for interviewing recruiters and checking references on recruiters and things like that. Yeah, so I'll have a link in here. You can email me on there. I have also a resource website called Travel Scrubs Hub, and I have a lot of resources on there for travel nurses as well. I'm also very active on social media, so I put a lot of tips on my Instagram, and I post little videos with tips on there too. And also on my Snapchat, like almost daily, I'm posting little videos, just advice and tips and answering questions live on Snapchat too.
That is awesome. I love it. Well, I'm so glad we got to do this. Hopefully we'll do more in the future.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah,
all right. Bye, guys. Thanks.